Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from YourBlackWorld.com, and this week you saw that President Obama came down to the National Urban League, which is the place where I happen to be located right now, and he announced an initiative in which he is going to create an office for African American education. A lot of people have said that this is the move they've been waiting for, that this shows the president's commitment to African American issues. Then there are some who say, look, this is just pandering. The election is around the corner, so this really doesn't mean a whole lot. So to try to understand this a little more carefully, I wanted to talk to Miss Worokya Duncan, who is a longtime educator. She's a mother, she's a wife, she's kind of done everything, and she has an understanding and a keen interest in the education of our children. She's been an educator for many, many years, and she is also right in the war zone in New York City, so she knows what she's talking about. How are you doing today, Miss Duncan?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Good, good. Now, I should have written this down, but how many years have you been teaching, by the way?
This is my 14th year.
14 years. Okay, so 14 years, that pretty much means you've done a lot, you've seen a lot. And so I want to ask you, when you saw this initiative by President Obama, did you think that it was just what the doctor ordered, or do you think that maybe it's not quite what the White House might want us to chalk it up to be?
So when I first saw, I guess, the banner that was on the Huffington Post, I was jumping up and down. I was thrilled. I was so happy. And then I clicked on it and I started reading exactly what was in the initiative and went to the White House site that actually has all of the information down. And I kind of felt like my bubble was burst. And the reason for that was, one, it's not a law. It's an initiative, which is basically, this is the idea that I want promoted and the idea that I want people to believe. We know that with NCLB, which is actually a law, there are a bunch of states who have opted out of different ways to be held accountable. And that's actually a law. So what's going to happen with something that's simply an initiative? How do we keep people accountable to ensure that everybody is being equally served? That's one. Two, I was thinking about the new Common Core. Well, it's not super new, but for New York State, it's going to be something that's enacted, especially in charter schools this coming year. And what I don't see in it is any tie between those who are making the federal, state, and local standards with this initiative. Again, it's simply an idea. If there aren't going to be any offices or any type of tie-in or buy-in to ensure what we've been trying to do since prior to Brown versus Board of Education, how do we keep not only, and I love Obama, trust me, I think President Obama has been amazing, and I don't think that he gets enough credit for what it is that he's done. Okay, that's what we do. But in this case, I think that it's somewhere between the solution and pandering. I don't see it as something that's really going to do much of anything. Thirdly, I'm concerned at how the wording makes it seem as if the problems that are unique, I guess, to the African American community came somewhat out of a vacuum. There's a mention of Brown versus Board of Education, but the danger in that is making it seem as if it's only a legal issue that was preventing African Americans from learning properly. We do understand that segregation was around before and that allegedly integration was supposed to be the solution, but we also know that the integration was one way, and so there was no accountability for real diversity. I would love to have seen something in the initiative that ensured not so much a multicultural, because when we talk about multicultural, we again, blur the line so that there is no individualism, there is no true celebration of the separate culture. But I would also want to make sure that there aren't teachers who are saying this is another population, like how the English language learners are taught as if, they are totally different type of people, or learning disabilities students are taught as if they're a whole different type of people. African American students are not a whole different type of people. There are students who have been marginalized not only in their neighborhood schools, but in other schools simply because of how they look. Another thing the initiative does not really address is teacher preparation. There's a line that says something about ensuring equitable access to well-prepared teachers, but there is no comment or line item that says how that's going to be done. Like, what will be the connection between how teachers are prepared, considering we have teacher factories, and what is really happening on, like, in the war zone, as we say, like, how is that going to look? So, I mean, I love the fact that there is an initiative. I love the fact that something's been signed. I love the fact that a president actually paid attention to it and the whole beautiful array of people that are around him signing it. But I'm like, okay, now what? What's really going to happen? How are we going to measure students learning better? How are we going to know that the teacher that's in this particular class doesn't have some type of underlining racist views and low expectations of students? How do we know that we're not now going to even pity students so much that we change the standards so that children are even less prepared than they were before, just to make them feel better about what's been going on for decades? So I'm just really concerned about what's not there more than what is there. So for people who may not be educators, it looks wonderful. But for those of us who have been there are a whole lot of questions.
Well, you know, it's ironic that we're talking about this tonight because tomorrow morning I'm going to moderate a panel on the state of urban education at the Urban League, and it's really an interesting thing for me because I've had a chance to talk to some of my colleagues about the state of urban education. I talked to Dr. Christopher Emden at Columbia this morning. Julianne Malvo and I had a good conversation about it today. And literally we'll be discussing this topic on the very same stage in which President Obama just announced his initiative. And my goal, and I'm not going to mention the president's name when I speak because you know how black folks get when you talk about their family member. But the goal is to seek out truth and to say, you know, what are the solutions? And so I would like to pose that question to you as an educator that I respect. When you look at what's going on with education, particularly urban education, particularly education that pertains to our kids, what do you see as a couple of things that can be done at the executive level that can create some real solutions to some very serious problems?
I don't think that it is an executive level thing. I think that change truly happens from the home and from the ground up. I think that there is, I don't know if I would call it a moral void that is within some communities. For example, I'm not sure if it may have been on your website, but there was some Jacksonville craziness that happened at some store where hundreds of African American teenagers went in and basically just mobbed the place. And they were stealing things and just messing up the entire area. And I was so confused because I'm like, how do you get that many children to agree to do something illegal and publicly, and no one knows about it, and hardly anybody has said anything about it? Like, there has to be something going on or not going on within the home and within the community, that something like this was planned grand scale and no one was able to stop it or no one was able to do anything. And so when I read it and I saw the comments under, there were so many, you know, negative comments and racist comments, but sadly I found myself saying, hey, I agree, because there's something wrong in our community. I don't know when it started. I don't know how it started, but we can't expect that we can legislate proper behavior and a proper desire for education. Maybe it's because some people believe that even if you have a great education, people will look at you and they'll see your color and that's what they'll see first instead of your experience. Some people think, hey, I'm in a poor school anyway, poor neighborhood. My mom was there. My grandmother was there. We've been here. This is where we're going to be. That could be it. But I feel like there's just something within that's missing. It could be the lack of, proper nutrition in certain areas, and people are worrying about the fact that they have a food drought in their neighborhood, so they can't really worry about proper education, or they can't get a job. So if I don't have lights on, my kid isn't really going to school anyway, because how are they going to do their homework? But I definitely don't think it's something that can be done on the executive level. I keep saying shame on these churches that are in the neighborhoods, like right next to the liquor stores or the fried chicken stores. I'm like, if you've been there for 40, 50 years and there's been absolutely no change affected in your neighborhood, then you need to leave, because you're clearly not doing what it is that you're supposed to do. And so for me, I put the onus on churches. I put the onus on communities, because that's where it needs to be done, and that's where it's not happening.
Well, I'll certainly agree with you is that the onus should be on all of us, the bottom up and the top down as well. You can't legislate morality, but you can legislate equal funding for different schools. I know that I had a child that I adopted, and she went to an inner city school, and she was a good kid. I'm not gonna let my child go to school and act a fool. But they were giving the kids no homework. I had to go make them give her homework. They had no books. I had to find a way to get books for my child. She lived with her mother. I adopted her. I used to be her track coach, so I didn't give birth to her. But, I remember fighting with teachers who were trying to convince me that everything was fine. And I said, no, everything is not fine. She's not even reading on grade level. And I looked up this school, and I saw that it was one of the worst performing schools in the state. And so I think that while we can certainly point to those parents who are not doing a good enough job with their kids, the question is, to me as well, what about those parents who are doing a good job? Those parents who have well-behaved kids, who are being sent to school every day, who can't go to school safe because they're worried about being shot by a gangbanger. They can't get what they need at school because the school doesn't have any books. They're not getting access to the American dream. And so I think that overall, that we certainly want parents to make good decisions. But, I teach at Syracuse University, and I've seen those white kids do some things that I've never seen a black kid do. The fact is, teenagers misbehave in general. But, I will agree with you, though, Worokya, is, and I'll let you get the last word, is that there are things that are disturbing things about our kids that are going on right now. You've got a lot of daddies that are not in the home. A lot of this due to the war on drugs and so many fathers being taken away to the penitentiaries. And all these kids are growing up without the guidance of a father. And I don't care what anybody says. I believe every child needs to have a father or a father figure who can guide them. Second of all, these kids are turning on the radio and they're hearing music being promoted by major corporations that are telling them to engage in socially deviant behavior. When a rapper is telling you every day to repeat lyrics that say that you're nothing but a blunt smoking, liquor drinking fool, with tattoos on your arms up and down and running through the club with your pants sagging and carrying your gun, killing other black men. Well, that's going to sink into the psyches of our kids. So we now see kids committing crimes that were unthinkable 20, 30 years ago. And then you add that to just the trauma of the urban experience altogether, where you have kids that have a very difficult time even conceptualizing the hope and opportunity that comes with education, when you have to even worry about getting enough food to eat or getting to school without being shot, or the fact that you've had 10 friends in your high school that have been killed. It's hard to elevate out of that and just have a normal mentality, so I think all those things come into play. So I think that accountability, I think, is the key word. I think that's where you and I agree. That mother must be held accountable, that father must be held accountable, that child must be held accountable, the president must be held accountable, Congress, or you and I as scholars must be held accountable, because this mess is something that's going to be cleaned up by all of us. I'll let you get the last word.
One thing I found out this week, I was actually at the White House on Monday it's called the White House African American Girls and Women's Forum, and we were talking about education. And one thing I found out that I did not know is that basically only 10% of funding for schools comes from the federal government. 90% comes from the states. And so the states are individually deciding what child in what neighborhood is deserving of a certain amount of money being spent on them per day and per child. And I found that, just disgusting. I really honestly thought that it was just, the federal government just throws money at them and then they're deciding just by property tax. But I found out and was surprised that it was states. And so, like, when we do think about the top down, what I'd like to see, and I don't know if this is possible, but you know how every now and again Congress will put certain things in different bills in order to get it to pass, or it won't pass because they snuck something in a bill. I would love to see somebody with a conscience in Congress decide that what they're going to do for states all around is, unless they do have an equitable education disbursement of funds, then certain things that they're looking for will not be funded by the federal government. Whether it is, better roads, whether it is their state buildings, whatever it is that they're looking for to make their state better, if they're not understanding the importance of equitable education, then they shouldn't get funding for that. Like, let the education funding be tied to something that they really, really want. And if that's not done, then ensure that you can't get funding for it. Because if it's the same people who are going to be benefiting over and over again, and then we're going to have someone else coming up with a new initiative, and then we'll come up with more data saying why they're not doing as well as they're doing. Like, I'm tired of hearing it. Do something that's really going to work so that we stop having these conversations, because it's not going to change.
All right. Well, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I truly appreciate the expertise you're bringing to the table. And when I say to any parent that's watching, you have to realize that you're right. The state government, the federal government, no government is going to save you from your child, and the solutions will probably emerge long after your child has grown up and moved out of the house. So if I were you, I would right now take the responsibility of making sure that your child understands the importance of education, and as a family, make that day-to-day commitment to pushing your child to be their best. That's something that will solve a lot of problems for a lot of us real fast. So thank you so much for your time, Worokya. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. And thank you for checking us out at yourblackworld.com. Please keep coming back. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.